Welcome to Chatbotcasts, and thank you for tuning in to our episode on planning a one-week itinerary for a trip to France. I'm your host, and today we have an expert who will guide us through the process of creating an unforgettable French adventure. Let's start with the basics. What are the first steps in planning a trip to France, and how important is it to prioritize regions and understand travel times between destinations?
Well, let's dive right into it. When planning a trip to France, especially for just 1 week, it's crucial to be strategic about your itinerary. First, you need to decide on the regions you want to explore, as France is a diverse country with a lot to offer. Let me think. As a general rule, for a week-long trip, it's best to focus on 1 to 3 destinations, ideally in different regions, to get a good variety of experiences. Understanding travel times between destinations is also vital. For instance, if you're traveling from Paris to the south of France, you're looking at around 3 to 4 hours by train or about an hour by flight. Interesting to note, train travel in France is very efficient, with the TGV, train à grande vitesse, linking many major cities, making it easy to move around the country quickly. For example, you can travel from Paris to Marseille in just a few hours, which is perfect for a week-long itinerary. Prioritizing regions helps you make the most of your time. If you want to see the iconic sights of Paris, the charm of Provence, and the beauty of the French Riviera, you'll need to plan your travel days wisely. A good example would be spending a few days in Paris, then traveling to Marseille, and finally ending your trip in Nice, as outlined in some itineraries. So to summarize, the first steps involve choosing your key destinations, understanding the travel times between them, and planning your itinerary to maximize your time in each region. This way, you can ensure a well-rounded and memorable French adventure.
That's a great overview of the initial steps in planning a trip to France. Now let's talk about the best times to visit France. What are the optimal seasons or months for a trip, and what are the advantages of visiting during each of these times?
When it comes to the best times to visit France, the country offers something unique in each season, so it really depends on what you're looking for. Let's break it down. If you prefer mild weather and smaller crowds, spring, April to June, and autumn, September to November, are excellent choices. During these seasons, the temperatures are pleasant and the scenery is particularly beautiful, with blooming flowers in the spring and vibrant foliage in the autumn. These periods are ideal for exploring cities like Paris, visiting vineyards in Bordeaux, or enjoying the scenic landscapes of Provence without the peak tourist season chaos. Summer, of course, is peak tourist season with warm weather and long days. This is the best time to enjoy the beaches of the French Riviera, attend outdoor festivals, or take a road trip through the countryside. However, it's also the busiest time, so expect larger crowds and higher prices. Winter, from December to March, is great for those who love winter sports or want to experience the festive atmosphere in cities like Paris. The Christmas markets, ice skating rinks, and decorated streets make for a magical experience. Plus, it's a good time to visit museums and indoor attractions without the crowds. Interesting to note, each region has its own unique seasonal highlights. For example, the Loire Valley is stunning in the spring and autumn, while the Alps are perfect for skiing in the winter. So, whether you're looking for cultural experiences, outdoor adventures, or simply a relaxing getaway, France has something to offer in every season. Just plan accordingly based on your preferences and what you want to do during your trip.
Let's move on to choosing the best destinations for a 7-day trip to France. For someone with just a week, what are some of the most recommended destinations, and how can you balance city exploration with day trips or visits to other regions? For example, if someone wants to see both the iconic sights of Paris and the beauty of the south of France, what would be a good itinerary?
When it comes to choosing the best destinations for a 7-day trip to France, you really can't go wrong with a mix of iconic cities and scenic regions. Let's say you want to see both the iconic sights of Paris and the beauty of the south of France. That's a great combination. Let's start with Paris. You should definitely spend a few days here to soak in the city's magic. Day 1 could be all about the Louvre, Notre Dame, and a dinner cruise on the Seine. The next day, you could take a day trip outside Paris, perhaps to Versailles or the Palace of Fontainebleau. On your third day, explore the charming neighborhoods of Marais and Montmartre, and of course, visit the Eiffel Tower. After Paris, you can travel to the south of France. A good itinerary would involve heading to Marseille, where you can explore the city's vibrant old town and the Basilique Notre-Dame de la Garde. From Marseille, you can easily travel to Nice, which is a great base for exploring the French Riviera. Here you can visit Aise, Monaco, and enjoy the stunning beaches and scenic views of the Côte d'Azur. To balance city exploration with day trips or visits to other regions, consider using your travel days wisely. For example, you could take a train from Paris to Marseille, which is about a 3-hour journey, and then another short train ride to Nice. This way, you're not wasting too much time on travel, but still getting to experience different parts of the country. Interesting to note, if you have an extra day or two, you could also fit in a visit to Provence, where you can enjoy the picturesque villages, vineyards, and the beautiful landscapes of the Alpes region. This adds a nice rural contrast to your urban and coastal experiences. So a sample itinerary could look like this: 3 days in Paris, 1 day traveling to and exploring Marseille, and then 3 days in Nice with day trips to the French Riviera. This way, you get a good mix of city life, cultural experiences, and scenic beauty, all within a week.
Let's dive into some specific itinerary examples. Walk us through a detailed 7-day itinerary focusing on Paris and the south of France, such as the one you mentioned earlier with Paris, Marseille, and Nice. What are some must-see attractions and activities for each day, and what tips do you have for making the most out of each day?
Let's break down a detailed 7-day itinerary for Paris and the south of France, which is a fantastic way to experience the diversity of France in a short time. Day 1, Paris. Start your journey in Paris, the City of Lights. Begin with a visit to the Louvre Museum, one of the world's most famous museums. Make sure to buy your tickets ahead of time to avoid the long lines. After the Louvre, grab lunch and stroll along the Seine River towards Notre Dame Cathedral. In the evening, enjoy a dinner cruise on the Seine to see the city's landmarks illuminated. Day 2, Paris. Take a day trip outside Paris. Versailles is a great option with its stunning palace and gardens. Alternatively, you could visit the Palace of Fontainebleau or the charming town of Reims. If you prefer to stay in Paris, explore the Montmartre neighborhood, visit the Sacré-Cœur Basilica, and enjoy the artistic vibe of the area. Day 3, Paris. Spend the day exploring the Marais and Montmartre neighborhoods. Visit the Eiffel Tower, either by taking the stairs or the elevator to the top for breathtaking views. In the afternoon, wander through the charming streets of Le Marais, known for its fashionable boutiques, art galleries, and historic buildings. Day 4, Paris to Marseille. Travel to Marseille by train, which takes about 3 hours. Upon arrival, explore the Old Town, visit the Basilique Notre-Dame de la Garde, and enjoy the local seafood. Marseille has a unique Mediterranean vibe that's quite different from Paris. Day 5, Marseille to Nice. Take a short train ride to Nice, the capital of the French Riviera. Spend the day exploring Nice's famous Promenade des Anglais, visit the Chagall Museum, and enjoy the stunning views of the Bay d'Ange. Don't miss the local market, Cours Soleil, for a taste of local produce and crafts. Day 6, Nice and the French Riviera. Take a day trip to Aise in Monaco. Aise is a picturesque medieval village perched on a hilltop, offering breathtaking views of the Mediterranean. In Monaco, visit the Prince's Palace, the Casino de Monte Carlo, and the beautiful Jardin Exotique. Day 7, Nice. Spend your last day in Nice relaxing on the beach or taking a boat tour to see the French Riviera from a different perspective. You could also visit the nearby town of Saint-Paul-de-Vence, known for its artistic history and stunning views. Tips: always buy your train tickets in advance to secure the best prices. Consider purchasing a Paris Museum pass to skip the lines at popular attractions. Don't miss trying the local cuisine, such as bouillabaisse in Marseille and salade niçoise in Nice. Be prepared for crowds in popular areas, especially during peak season. This itinerary provides a great balance of city life, cultural experiences, and scenic beauty, making the most of your week in France.
That's a fantastic itinerary for exploring Paris and the south of France. Now let's talk about transportation and logistics. What are the best ways to travel between these destinations, such as trains or road trips, And how can listeners efficiently book and manage their transportation?
When it comes to traveling between destinations in France, the transportation options are quite versatile and efficient. For a trip that includes Paris, Marseille, and Nice, I would highly recommend using the train network. Let's talk about trains first. France has an excellent high-speed train system, the TGV train à grande vitesse, which connects many major cities. For instance, you can travel from Paris to Marseille in about 3 hours, and from Marseille to Nice in just over 2 hours. This makes train travel a convenient and relatively quick way to move around the country. To book your train tickets efficiently, I suggest using the SNCF website or the Trainline app. These platforms allow you to book your tickets in advance, which is advisable to secure the best prices. You can also consider purchasing a France Rail Pass if you plan to take multiple train journeys during your trip. If you prefer a more leisurely pace or want to explore rural areas, a road trip could be a great option. However, keep in mind that renting a car, especially an automatic, should be done in advance to ensure availability. The roads in France are generally well maintained, and driving can be a pleasant way to see the countryside, but it does take more time compared to trains. For those who prefer not to drive, there are also bus services available, though they are generally slower than trains. Companies like Flixbus and Ouibus offer affordable options for longer routes. Interesting to note, if you're planning to explore the French Riviera extensively, you might also consider renting a car for a day or two to visit places like Èze and Monaco, as public transportation can be less frequent in these areas. Overall, trains are the most efficient way to travel between major cities in France, but a combination of trains and local transportation or car rentals can provide the flexibility you need for a memorable trip. Always book your tickets and rentals in advance to make the most of your time and budget.
Let's move on to some cultural and practical tips for our listeners. What are some key cultural nuances that visitors should be aware of when traveling in France? And are there any specific tips for dining, shopping, and interacting with locals?
When traveling in France, understanding some key cultural nuances can make your experience much more enjoyable and respectful. Let's start with dining, as mealtimes are quite sacred in French culture. For instance, it's customary to greet the shopkeeper or restaurant staff with a friendly bonjour or bonsoir when entering, and to say merci and au revoir when leaving. Dining hours are also important. Lunch is typically between 12 and 2 p.m., and dinner between 7 and 9 p.m. Interesting to note, the French place a high value on mealtime etiquette. It's considered polite to keep your hands visible on the table, not to start eating until everyone has been served, and to wait for the host to indicate where to sit. Tipping is also different. A service charge is usually included, but leaving a small tip of 5 to 10% is appreciated for good service. When it comes to shopping, the French are known for their love of quality and craftsmanship. Visiting local markets like the Cours Salea in Nice can be a great way to experience this. Be prepared to engage in some light conversation with vendors. It's part of the shopping culture. Also, many shops close for a few hours in the afternoon, so plan your shopping accordingly. Interacting with locals can be a highlight of your trip. Learning a few basic French phrases like bonjour, merci, and excusez-moi can go a long way in showing respect and getting a positive response. The French appreciate when visitors make an effort to speak their language, even if it's just a few words. In terms of practical tips, it's a good idea to have some cash on hand, especially in smaller towns or markets, as not all places accept credit cards. Additionally, be mindful of pickpocketing in crowded areas like train stations and tourist hotspots. Overall, France is a country that values elegance, respect, and enjoyment of life's simple pleasures. By being aware of these cultural nuances, you can have a more authentic and enjoyable experience during your trip.
That's great advice on cultural nuances and practical tips. Now, let's open the floor for any listener questions or common concerns. What are some common mistakes or misconceptions that tourists often have when planning their first trip to France, and how can they avoid them?
When planning a first trip to France, there are several common mistakes and misconceptions that tourists often encounter, and being aware of these can make a significant difference in your experience. Hmm, let's start with one of the most common misconceptions: the idea that all French people are rude to tourists. This is far from the truth. While it's true that the French value their culture and customs, they generally appreciate visitors who make an effort to speak French and respect local norms. Learning a few basic French phrases like bonjour, merci, and excusez-moi can go a long way in getting a positive response from locals. Another mistake is underestimating the travel time between destinations. France is a larger country than many people realize, and traveling from one end to the other can take several hours, even by high-speed train. So, it's crucial to plan your itinerary carefully to avoid spending too much time on travel. Interesting to note, many tourists also overlook the importance of booking tickets and reservations in advance. Popular attractions like the Louvre, Eiffel Tower, and train tickets can sell out quickly, especially during peak season. Booking ahead of time can save you a lot of hassle and ensure you don't miss out on key experiences. Additionally, some visitors might assume that all restaurants and cafes accept credit cards, but this isn't always the case, especially in smaller towns or markets. Having some cash on hand can be very helpful. Finally, it's important to be mindful of pickpocketing in crowded areas like train stations and tourist hotspots. Keeping your valuables secure and being aware of your surroundings can prevent a lot of stress. By avoiding these common mistakes and being prepared, you can have a much more enjoyable and authentic experience in France. Remember, the key is to be respectful, plan ahead, and stay informed about local customs and practical tips.
That's excellent advice on avoiding common mistakes and misconceptions. What recommendations or resources do you have for someone planning their first trip to France? And are there any additional resources or further reading you'd suggest for listeners who want to dive deeper into planning their French adventure?
When planning your first trip to France, there are several final recommendations and resources that can make your experience even more enjoyable and stress-free. Let's start with the importance of learning some basic French phrases. While many French people speak English, especially in tourist areas, making an effort to speak French can greatly enhance your interactions with locals. There are many online resources, such as language learning apps and websites, that can help you get started. Interesting to note, understanding a bit about French culture and customs can also go a long way. For example, knowing that mealtimes are sacred and that you should greet shopkeepers and restaurant staff with a friendly bonjour or bonsoir can make your interactions more pleasant. For further reading and planning, I highly recommend checking out travel blogs and guides that specialize in France. Websites like Adventures by Lana and Join Us in France offer detailed itineraries, cultural insights, and practical tips that can be incredibly helpful. Additionally, consider purchasing a guidebook or downloading a travel app that provides offline maps and recommendations. These can be lifesavers when navigating unfamiliar cities and finding hidden gems. If you're looking to dive deeper into specific regions or activities, there are many podcasts and blogs dedicated to various aspects of French travel. For instance, if you're interested in road trips or camping in France, there are some excellent resources available that can provide detailed itineraries and tips. Finally, don't forget to stay flexible and open-minded. France is a country that values elegance and enjoyment of life's simple pleasures, so be sure to take your time, enjoy the local cuisine, and soak in the atmosphere. By combining these resources and tips, you'll be well prepared for an unforgettable French adventure. Bon voyage!
Given the detailed itinerary and practical tips provided, let's delve into some specific cultural and practical aspects. What are some essential do's and don'ts when interacting with locals, especially in restaurants and shops, to ensure a respectful and enjoyable experience?
When interacting with locals in France, especially in restaurants and shops, there are several essential do's and don'ts to keep in mind to ensure a respectful and enjoyable experience. First, let's talk about the dos. When entering a restaurant or shop, it's customary to greet the staff with a friendly bonjour or bonsoir, depending on the time of day. This sets a positive tone for your interaction. When dining, wait for the host to indicate where to sit and keep your hands visible on the table. It's also polite to wait until everyone has been served before starting to eat. In shops, engaging in light conversation with vendors is part of the culture. Ask questions about the products and show genuine interest. This can make the shopping experience more enjoyable and personal. Now let's move on to the don'ts. One common mistake is not respecting meal times. Avoid eating on the go or in public places, as meal times are considered sacred in French culture. Also, don't start eating until everyone at the table has been served. In restaurants, tipping is not as common as in some other countries, but leaving a small tip of 5 to 10% for good service is appreciated. However, don't overtip, as the service charge is usually included. When shopping, don't assume that all places accept credit cards. Having some cash on hand, especially in smaller towns or markets, can be very helpful. Finally, be mindful of your surroundings and keep your valuables secure, especially in crowded areas like train stations and tourist hotspots. This will help you avoid any potential issues with pickpocketing. By following these do's and don'ts, you can ensure a respectful and enjoyable experience when interacting with locals in France. Remember, the French appreciate visitors who make an effort to respect their culture and customs.
That's really helpful advice on interacting with locals and respecting French culture. Now let's talk about some final tips and resources for our listeners. What are some recommended travel blogs, guides, or apps that you think would be invaluable for someone planning their first trip to France?
When planning your first trip to France, having the right resources can make a significant difference in your preparation and enjoyment. For travel blogs, I highly recommend checking out sites like Adventures by Lana and Join Us in France. These blogs offer detailed itineraries, cultural insights, and practical tips that are incredibly helpful for navigating France. Another great resource is the Kim Kim website, which provides unique itinerary ideas and detailed guides for various regions in France. For example, their itineraries for Paris, the south of France, and other regions are well thought out and include a mix of city exploration, day trips, and cultural experiences. In terms of guides, the Michelin Guide is a classic and reliable choice. It provides comprehensive information on restaurants, attractions, and hidden gems across France. Additionally, guidebooks from publishers like Lonely Planet and Rick Steves are excellent for in-depth information and practical advice. For apps, the Trainline app is indispensable for booking train tickets and managing your travel schedule. Google Translate can also be very helpful, especially if you're not fluent in French, as it can translate text and speech in real time. If you're interested in more specialized information, such as road trips or camping in France, there are some excellent podcasts and blogs dedicated to these topics. For instance, the Join Us in France podcast has episodes on road trips and camping, which can provide valuable insights and tips. Finally, consider downloading travel apps like Citymapper or Google Maps, which can help you navigate cities and find the best routes. These resources will help you stay informed, plan efficiently, and make the most of your time in France. Bon voyage.
Thank you for tuning in to Chatbotcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it engaging. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update, and visit us at www.chatbotcasts.com to explore more exciting episodes. See you next time, and happy listening.